Yes.
You've spoken a lot about law.
About what?
About law.
Okay.
Lessig also suggests that architecture matters in such issues. For instance, DVD players have regional encoding such that if a DVD was made in Hong Kong for that market, I can't view it on my DVD player, right? In fact, computers are being built such that after I play the first DVD, I can't play it in a different place. Same thing with internet providers. Most internet providers restrict you from having your client computer act as a server, right? But then put rules on you if you use their data. Architecture is concerned. I wanted to address that.
Talking about architecture of information systems and how they restrict the flow of information. If that's what you're saying, I believe in maximum information flow. However, this is actually a good time for me to mention several things briefly. I'm not in favor of no copyright protections because I don't think that freedom of speech or freedom of the press, especially when it comes to my books, I don't believe that that gives people the right to take someone else's intellectual property and do as they please with it. And by the way, this is one of the points that Jefferson and I disagree. Not that Jefferson ever heard what I thought about it, but I disagree with Jefferson. Jefferson didn't like copyright laws. But I think Stuart Brand is famous for his famous saying, information wants to be free, and I did get to once say to Stuart Brand, well, that might be true, but creators of information still need to eat. So creators of information have to be paid for their creations. I think that's an extremely important point. Some other seeming exceptions to the First Amendment. No one has ever said that the First Amendment gives people the right to criminally conspire, to do something. That's a crime. That was never protected under the First Amendment. And also, while we're on the subject, false advertising that taken to its extreme could have someone advertising a product as some kind of medicine, and when the person takes consumes the product, they drop dead. That's something else as well. That's advertising. That's not free speech, and it's not freedom of the press. So, in general, to get back to your architecture of information question, I'm in favor of maximizing the flow of information, as long as it doesn't do the three things that I just mentioned. Bob?
Ryan, there's that point. What about people that propagate hate?
People propagate what?
Hate.
Hate.
Because you see, there are laws against hate. But where do you draw the line between hate and criticism?
Well, about 20 years ago, thanks, Bob, there was a case in Skokie, Illinois, that involved the ACLU, and it involved several Jewish organizations. The case concerned some local Nazis who wanted to march in Skokie. And I can't remember who I was talking to then, but what I said was, as painful as it is, I would side with the ACLU, who were saying that the Nazis need to be allowed to march. Because if you don't allow the Nazis to march, you're doing exactly what they're preaching should happen in any case. The first time you make a decision to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to stop you from talking, it's hate speech. I'm going to stop you from walking because you are walking on behalf of something that is an enemy to democracy. The minute you do that, you're walking right in the direction and right along with those enemies of democracy. So you know what? Hate speech is horrible. But under a society that respects free speech, people who see hate speech for what it is can forthrightly criticize it. And if people are rational, as again I think they are, then the hate speakers will be seen for what they are. That's far better than prohibiting them from talking. Because when you prohibit them from talking, someone can later prohibit you from talking. And that's what the problem is. Marlene?
What is your opinion of Bush and Florida, which you said you did not have time to discuss?
What's my opinion of Bush and Florida in the year 2000? I think that the Supreme Court had never before made a ruling like that, where although in some technical sense they were talking obviously about a federal election, what they were doing was they were prohibiting the justly concluded decision of the Florida Court of Appeals, which is the high court, from being enacted. Our federal Supreme Court prevented the recount in Florida in the face of the Florida Supreme Court saying there should be a recount. That is an extraordinary violation of states' rights in the United States. And another reason why I'm no fan, to use that word, of Bill Clinton, and I know it's easy to say, but were I president, what I would have done right after that Supreme Court decision is I would have sent the National Guard down to Florida and I would have said, you do a recount in the interest of democracy, rather than letting the Supreme Court stage, in effect, a judicial coup d'etat, which is what I think that event was. It's a good thing I didn't say that during the speech. John would have probably had more to say, you know.
Well, Jeffersoni,
Yeah.
states' right.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
A little gray, slightly more gray zone. What happens when the force of state agrees and become complicitous, like the embedding of journalists in the coverage of Iraq?
The embedding of journalists is not a problem as long as the journalists report the truth. I mean, I think you have to take advantage of whatever, you know, situations you can use. What would be wrong with the embedding is if the journalists only reported what the government wanted them to report. But from what I was able to glean of the embedding, the journalists by and large reported things as they saw them. I have time for one last question. Yes?
Well, I was just going to add, in relation to embedding, the problem, in my view, was journalists were forced, compelled to agree to a set of conditions, so engaged in self-prior restraint, and, you know, which kind of produced minimal coverage or very safe coverage.
Well, the question was, if the journalists had to engage in some kind of prior restraint, was that something, you know, that was no good? My view is half a glass of water is better than no glass of water. And having journalists there, even in unfavorable conditions, was still a lot better than what happened in the first Gulf War, where there were no journalists out there at all. Thank you very much.